Listen to what the former president told a Christian group at the Turning Point USA Believers Summit in West Palm Beach. The former president telling the crowd that if they re-elect him to the White House, they won't have to worry about voting ever again.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
He said it 3 times.
Project 2025 is this. And I'm going to give you the long version here because everybody asks. And I'm really going to give you the long version because this is kind of my wheelhouse. So in the 1980s, the Republican Party was taking an entirely new direction under Ronald Reagan. And they wanted to prove that they really knew what they were doing. So they worked together with the Heritage Foundation, which was a right-wing think tank, and then they produced their own platform. It's going to be really important in a second. And what they did with those things was they said, this is a new direction we're going. We're going to get rid of all that idea that we've had since with the Democrats since World War II, that the government should, and you know I say this a million times, regulate business, provide a basic social safety net, promote infrastructure, and protect civil rights. People had agreed on that since the Democrats were on board with that in 1933. The Republicans really swing behind it, at least by the 1950s, and that's known as the liberal consensus. Liberal because it defends people individually. That is, the government will push back the forces that are trying to, abuse workers or abuse people of color or make it so that people in the state of Maine don't have electricity or any of the things that really people needed after World War II. And they'll provide a basic social safety net, for people who get injured or whatever. So members of both parties had agreed on that, and it was called the liberal consensus. It was the idea that that's how the government should work, because what that does is it protects individuals, and that once individuals are protected and have a decent standard of living, they will, be able to innovate. They'll be able to move society forward. And this is going to seem really weird, but you may or may not remember, certainly if you're older, you probably will. There really was this thing when we were kids in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s that people were supposed to be innovating all the time. That if you worked in a factory and you had a good idea, you were supposed to tell your manager, because there was this faith in workers that they knew what they were doing and that they had good ideas. Comes out of World War II. And do you remember Popular Mechanics, the magazine Popular Mechanics? Everybody had Popular Mechanics. The idea was that everybody could invent stuff and everybody could think up stuff and everybody could be part of this innovative world. Well, that was the liberal consensus. The idea was to put effort into ordinary people. They would produce all this stuff and all these new ideas and all this value out of their work, and that would support people up at the top, and that basically stuff would push upward. The Reagan Revolution in the 1980s said that's crap. That by trying to encourage people at the bottom, the government, to do that, the government, has to put money into schools and has to put money into jobs programs and has to regulate business and dictate how workers should be treated, for example. So we're going to get rid of that because we don't believe that's how society works best. We think society works best by concentrating on the supply side of the economy. That is, by making sure government policies support people with money. Because those people with money, first of all, will have earned it in this ideology, and they will be much more efficient at using their money than government bureaucrats will. So by concentrating money among those people and getting rid of the regulations for workers and skimming down education and all that, it will free up more money for them to invest efficiently in the economy, and that will really expand the economy really quickly, and everybody will do a lot better. That was what was known as supply side economics. And hand in hand with that is going to be something later on called neoliberalism. And that's a real misnomer, the whole neoliberalism idea, because what they're trying to say is that we're in favor of the old form it's somewhat complicated, form of liberalism before the liberal consensus. And what that means is that we're not going to get involved in anything at all. We're going to turn everything over to the markets, that we're just going to have free trade and basically may the best man win, essentially. All right. So when they did that, the Republicans in the I bet you're all asleep. I'm sorry. I just went all professor on you. But when they did that in the 1980s, the Heritage Foundation released a big piece of writing explaining why this was a good idea, or why they thought this was a good idea. And the Republican Party also instituted a new kind of political platform. And you can find this online, by the way, at someplace called the American Presidency Project. And if you go to the documents and to political platforms, you will find that the 1980 Republican platform is really long, like really long. And a lot of it doesn't even make much sense, and it's not very well written, because what they were really trying to do is prove that they were wonks. They were demonstrating that they knew what they were doing. You know, they had this whole game plan out there. All right, so I just gave you that whole background because Project 2025 is an attempt to resurrect that concept. Now, Heritage has been doing these kind of plans for a long time, but this real heavy emphasis on Project 2025 in this moment is designed to imitate that earlier plan, which I believe was called Mandate for Change of 1980, in which they're saying, here's a blueprint for a new kind of Republican. All right? I hope you're with me on that. Because what 2025 is a blueprint of over 900 pages for an authoritarian figure to take over the United States of America. And this is, I think, one of the things that's very hard for people when they talk about 2025 or many of the other things happening around us, is it's so extreme we can't believe it's happening. And this is a problem for me writing about it, because it's like, really? You know, and especially, you know, one of the things that my hair is on fire about still every day is the Supreme Court's July 1st Trump versus United States decision that says that a president can commit crimes in office and get away with it, which is antithetical to everything this country has ever stood for. But if you say to people, we just created a king, they're like, yeah, let's see your tinfoil hat, you know? But it happened, and it is happening. So Project 2025, let me dissect it a little bit for you. Heritage, which was a think tank in the model that I just described, that idea of turning everything over to the markets and letting money concentrate at the top of the scale because they think that that's more efficient. And by the way, between 1981 and 2021, more than $50 trillion moved from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 0.1%. So it worked, but it wasn't actually working the way that Americans who voted for it thought it would. The argument was that money would get reinvested more efficiently than the government had done, and then everybody would do really well. But that's not what happened. The money simply moved to all the rich people, which is not a surprise, really, right? All right. So what happens is that Heritage got a new president about 2 years ago, a guy named Kevin Roberts.
Donald Trump is disavowing Project 2025, the plan on how he and his allies will consolidate power in the Oval Office and gut our system of checks and balances if he wins. The problem? The plan was created for him by his closest advisors. His name appears in written plans about Project 2025 hundreds of times. Of the 38 people who designed this plan, 31 worked in the Trump administration. Some of the masterminds are one of Trump's top political appointees and his deputy press secretary. And one of his closest aides was a top advisor on the project. The plan is supported by the Heritage Foundation, an organization Trump relies on to help push his agenda.
We need the help of the Heritage Foundation.
So, when Donald Trump claims he knows nothing about Project 2025, you know he is lying. Project 2025 is his plan by his allies for his second term. And now his handpicked vice president will make sure that it happens.
And I want to thank especially Kevin Roberts and all of the Heritage Foundation for 50 years of incredible work on conservative policy.
Project 2025 is a dangerous blueprint for Trump's America.
You see President Trump say this and what you envision as being behind it tactically.
Well, I think it's the sign of a great leader who understands he's in a terrific political news cycle. He's run a really good campaign from start up to this point. And the left's mischaracterization of Project 2025 had become a liability. I think we've seen that really turn around in the last few days since that statement. So no hard feelings from any of us at Project 2025 about the statement, because we understand Trump is the standard bearer and he's making a political, tactical decision there.
But number three, let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Your organization is named the Heritage Foundation because you understand that our glorious heritage is the foundation of everything we hope to achieve, which is why we need the help of the Heritage Foundation and everyone here tonight to get our tax cuts through the House, through the Senate.
Following the Trump tax cuts, households with incomes in the top 1% will receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025, compared to an average tax cut of less than $500 for households in the bottom 60%, according to the Tax Policy Center, TPC. As a share of after-tax income, tax cuts at the top, for both households in the top 1% and the top 5%, are more than triple the total value of the tax cuts received for people with incomes in the bottom 60%. Trump tax cuts eroded the U.S. revenue base. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimated in 2018 that the 2017 law would cost $1.9 trillion over 10 years. And recent estimates show that making the law's temporary individual income and estate tax cuts permanent would cost another roughly $400 billion a year beginning in 2027. Together with the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts enacted under President Bush, most of which were made permanent in 2012, the law has severely eroded our country's revenue base. Revenue as a share of GDP has fallen from about 19.5% in the years immediately preceding the Bush tax cuts to just 16.3% in the years immediately following the Trump tax cuts, with revenues expected to rise to an annual average of 16.9% of GDP in 2018 to 2026, excluding pandemic years, according to CBO. This is simply not enough revenue given the nation's investment needs and our commitments to Social Security and health coverage. The Trump tax cuts failed to deliver promised economic benefits, and we are feeling it today. Trump administration officials claimed their centerpiece corporate tax rate cut would, very conservatively, lead to a $4,000 boost in household income. New research shows that workers who earn less than about $114,000 on average in 2016 saw no change in earnings from the corporate tax rate cut, while top executive salaries increased sharply. Similarly, rigorous research concluded that the tax law's 20% pass-through deduction, which was skewed in favor of wealthy business owners, has largely failed to trickle down to workers in those companies who aren't owners. Like the Bush tax cuts before it, the 2017 Trump tax cut was a trickle-down failure. It is imperative that we all do our due diligence and research the policies of the current candidates because our lives are impacted. Whether you decide to vote red, blue, or other, your life will be impacted. You can start here. The 2017 Trump tax law was skewed to the rich, expensive, and failed to deliver on its promises. A 2025 course correction is needed. Updated June 13, 2024. By Chuck Marr, Samantha Jacoby, and George Fenton.
I will not be voting for former President Trump.
And it should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
I have known him well for 22 years, more than anybody else in this race has known him. And I can promise you this, if you put him back behind the desk in the Oval Office and a choice comes and a decision is needed to be made as to whether he puts himself first or he puts you first, how much more evidence do you need that he will pick himself?
I don't intend to support him for the Republican nomination.
Who do you hope to support?
I haven't decided yet. It won't be him.
And what was the reason for you not supporting him?
Where do I begin? Thank you.
I can tell you that in the state of Michigan, he is now being hurt and trails Biden because of the fact that the evangelical community is saying, we don't think this is our guy. I don't know whether he can shore that up again. I don't know if this has been said on the air before, but the information that I have from a very well-respected pollster is the evangelical voters are saying, some of them are saying enough is enough. It'll be interesting to see where this develops, because without them, he's got a real problem.
Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future content. Thanks for watching. See you soon.